Good day, podcast community. Pete Kane here, Podcast Pete and Community Builder. And we have a very special guest on our show. We were kind of rapping before the show about our Rotarian journey, and we have different journeys, but journeys of impact. And I'm pleased to announce Dirk is a guest on our show. Dirk, tell our viewers that don't know you who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then we'll get into the podcast.
Sounds awesome. So good morning to everyone. My name is Dirk Ebener. I live in the North Georgia part of Georgia. And I have, for the last about 30 years, I have worked in the trade show and conference industry around the world. So my job is and was to launch trade shows and conferences in new markets in 22 countries. And I have always enjoyed that. And Pete and I have met at one point in time down the road on many occasions, and actually have built a really good close friendship on this. And who I serve is really the small business community, as well as large companies that want to expand, that use trade shows and conferences as a platform to expand business, to launch their business. And I've done it in over 60 different industry segments around the world. And I've always enjoyed opening doors, just like Pete does, to connect people, to make networking work, to give people the platform to understand how business around the world in other cultures work. You know, it starts with little things like handing over a business card in a different country, which you need to know when you do business, but also to connect with someone and make sure that when they connect with you, that you are giving them the right information from the very beginning. And often it is not necessarily the immediate pitch, it's building patience and relationships. So that's what I have done for the last 30 plus years. And I really enjoy doing this, which it's very meaningful. And I've met a lot of great people. We just talked about Rotary. You know, you have the opportunity to travel the world as a business person, and you can attend meetings around the world with Rotary. And it's an organization that does a lot of good with like 1.4 million members around the world. And I believe that that is part of everybody's career, should be doing something like what Pete and I do when we're in Rotary.
That is so good. We were talking before about a lesson your dad taught you way back about recording and journaling. Would you share that with our viewers? Because I just picked it up at age 64. I wish I would have gotten it a little earlier, but share that story with our viewers.
Yeah, my parents allowed me at a very early age to travel. We always were a family that traveled. Ever since I can remember, I traveled to Italy and Spain and other countries. And I wanted to become that independent young man. And at an early age, my dad said, well, I can make that happen for you. I can allow you to go to England to learn English. Of course, it's the first foreign language that we learn. For those who haven't figured out, I'm actually from Germany. So I was able to go to England, but one thing that my dad told me was, he said, you know, you cannot lose the stories and the memories that you build when you travel. And what I want you to do is I want you to journal and write things down, not, you know, manuscripts or anything, but just make sure that you are writing things down that are important to you, that you experienced that day, that the people that you met, the food that you ate, the cultures that you saw when you went to a museum in London or anything like that, and write these things down, because down the road, you will share that and it will come back to you and it will become part of your travel nature when you travel in the future. And I have done that. I started at a very early age, at 12. And my dad said, when I came back, he said, I don't want to see your private things in there. I don't want to know what you did that I shouldn't know about. But I wanted you to share some of those pages with me so that people and I, as your dad, who made that work for you, actually can follow up on that. So that's how I started journaling, and I've journaled all along for many, many years. The books are long on the shelf about this, but it's a very important part to me. So I would highly recommend, really highly recommend, sit down and write down your stories. Don't
Mhm.
write essays. Write a couple of sentences. That's all you really need to do. But you can pass that on to whoever in your life is important, and you can share that. And maybe at some point start a blog and write about that, or even write a book like Pete and I have.
Yeah, I love that. I think as I reflect back on my writing journey, I'll call it, I was dyslexic, so misspelling words was like every other word I misspelled. So I was kind of shameful, embarrassed about putting down half words and stuff. And then it started to evolve when I had time to start really expressing myself. I got addicted to journaling. I mean, I don't do social media, I don't do TV, I don't do things that I used to spend time on, but I journal every single day. I'll journal at night what I learned. After a podcast, I'll journal things that stood out. And it's created such a creativity within me that I never knew. We were talking last night about food and just fellowship with one of my Rotarians. And he was talking about how important it is and what food means to just getting together with people. I know you do a food blog. Tell us
Mhm.
a little bit about what it means to really incorporate food in that journaling journey.
So whenever I travel, I always put a challenge in front of me for making sure that the journey, that the trip to England in this case, that's where I want to go with this, uh, that when you go to London, you're not just go ahead and pull out money left and right and go with whatever your means are. But I always put a challenge on my side. And so my challenge to myself for London was spending 60 pounds a day, which is equivalent about $72, $75, 60 pounds a day for food and beverage.
Mhm.
And knowing that London is one of the most expensive cities in the world, I knew up front that it might become a little bit tight.
Mhm.
But at the same time, it brings you to the point where food and people connect, because you walk down to the markets of London and you see people standing there. You start talking to them. You meet very interesting people just from interacting in the streets at the markets, and I'm very proud to say that I was able actually to stay right at the 58, 59 pound a day without really taking anything away from me. Yes, I was a little bit more stingy towards the end of it, but it was okay. um, Food and people together are a critical part of travel, and whenever you travel you should ask people, what's your favorite dish here. And so I was sitting at a coffee shop a couple of years ago and writing in my journal, and there was a young couple sitting at the table next to me at the coffee shop, and we started talking. They asked me if I was traveling and was journaling and so forth, and she told me that she was journaling herself as well, which made a very interesting connection. And so it was December, and they asked me flat out. They said, we have a party going on at our house tonight. It's multicultural. We have friends from all over. Would you like to join us? And I said, well, absolutely, will I do that? So they invited me to their house, and we had people from literally all over London and with various cultural backgrounds, and everybody shared a dish. And I, of course, unfortunately didn't have one because I was staying in a hotel, but it didn't matter. They
Yeah.
shared and we talked, and I found 2 bottles of German wine at a local store and brought them along as my contribution.
Uh-huh.
And it was such an event, an important experience for me, that these friendships still are there. When Kaylin, our daughter, and I were in London in December, we connected with some of my friends from way back.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing always is, it's like you said, my 4 centers of travel are the people that you connect with, that you learn from, and that you share with. The food that is putting people together. Often there's a community table. Why not sit down at that when you're a solo traveler and sit down and just, ask them, can I sit down with you at the community table? And then, of course, be open-minded to the culture
Yeah.
that is around you. And then ultimately, those stories that you build over your 5 days, 10 days, whatever number of days you're traveling, these shared in your journaling is an absolute fantastic experience all along. And you can share that in the future.
Wow. When years ago, I don't know how many years ago, you were sharing a story with me. And today I remember this story. I mean, that was at least, I don't know, 15 years ago,
Oh,
about
wow.
doing business in Asia,
Mhm.
about doing business in a different culture, what the etiquette was, that they want to get to know you. They want to have food and a meal with you
Mhm.
before anything else happens. Would you share that? I mean, I don't remember absolute details, but it always stuck in my mind about the proper way to
Yeah.
have fellowship in a different country.
It is a very important, and not only for your personal experience, but also for business. And it is very important that when you decide to do business overseas, that you start early on, way before you are getting on board and the door closes of the airplane and you are taken off, that you understand how the culture in this country is working business as well as personal, because you are measured by your understanding of culture. Nobody's expecting you to be perfect, but people expect you to be able to say a few words in the language, say thank you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, little things. Understand how to hand over a business card in Asia is completely different. You are building a relationship immediately with this business card by handing it over correctly to someone. And
Mm-hmm.
then, really not just put it in your pocket and stick it away and move on in life, but you need to pay attention, because a business card is extremely meaningful in other parts of the world. And people are really focusing on being recognized for who they are and what they have accomplished through that title and through who they are in the business. You need to understand, what are the table cultures, the seating arrangements, where is the leader or the most senior person at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Things like that are critical. And then to understand that, yes, the food they will put in front of you might not be really what you enjoy or what you expect. And often there are some items put in front of you that are a little bit unexpected. And you still have to, especially in Asia, you have to keep your face. You need to keep your cool, if you want to call it that. And the host will serve you. And it's okay to ask. I'm new to this. Is my first rodeo here, and can you tell me what is expected of me through your contact that will make that invitation happening. And when you travel in Asia, every country has amazing food to offer. You can go to a Korean barbecue, you can go to a function in China, or you can travel to India, to all these places. For me, that was always one of the most interesting elements. Now, remember that in Shanghai, I was invited to a dinner, semi-formal. It was at a restaurant that was actually in a shopping mall. And they had these joint rooms with a big lazy Sue in the middle, and we all
Mm-hmm.
sat around. And then they said, well, would you please follow us? So we walked outside, and there was this long line of photos of vegetables that some of them were I never had seen before. And we picked a couple of vegetables, and then we took the elevator all the way down into the basement, and that was a fresh market.
Hmm.
And we went to numerous stations that had fresh fish, that had all sorts of cheeses, again, vegetables and other items. And we would point at this, and of course, our Chinese host introduced it and told me what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then they would put it in a sack and they would go one level up where there was the kitchen, and you would hand over your shopping items and go back to your room. And sooner than later, things started to trigger in and you would eat along the way. And these are the type of experiences that you have when you're open-minded on your
Mm-hmm.
travel. In the business world, it's really important that you understand the basics. And we all make mistakes. Travel is often more interesting when you make mistakes. But what's important is that you understand what the mistake is, and that mistake becomes a memory, and you can learn from that. And I think that's a very important part of travel, either on business or on personal travel.
Ooh, that's beautiful. I have a friend I met, and he moved to Greece from the UK, and he talked about having that mindset to be open to learn the language.
Mhm.
So he didn't know how to speak Greek, but he started learning. And some of his friends that would come over there, I'm not speaking that language. I'm going to stick with my own language.
Yep.
But he said so much was learned by, one, the respect that you have for that country and that culture, and how he's been able to have such a meaningful relationships because he immersed himself and started to learn through that journey about the language. So when it comes to, like, you're doing business in different countries, how did you adapt to the languages and to being able to be kind of that person that connects at that level?
Let me make a little sidestep here real quick, because you mentioned Greece. And it's probably an example of how open-minded you need to be when you travel.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the island of Corfu years and years ago, and one of the things that I did was I met some people who stayed in the same area. And we connected, and we decided to rent some small little motorcycle scooters and go and explore the island. And we were driving around, and we were on the way back, and it started to get a little darker outside. And one of the mopeds broke down. And so we were in the middle of nowhere, nothing there, what we can do. And all the way up the hill, there was a little building, a farm. Mm-hmm. So we decided the only way we can get saved here is really to walk up there and see if we can, get some help or a phone call or whatever. And the owner of the property came down and started talking to us, looked at the moped and said, yeah, shook his head. That's all he said, because he was in his 70s. He didn't speak English. We didn't speak Greek, of course. So we walked up to his house, and he picked up the phone and called somebody. And his wife started putting food in front of us. Wow. Hospitality pure. Wine and food and cheeses and olives and whatever you had. And a couple of minutes later, his son showed up, and his grandson. And it turned out that his son had actually worked in the car manufacturing places in Germany and spoke German.
Oh my God.
So we were like all starting to, he said he can fix it, but he gave us a ride back on the back of the pickup truck. We made it back. The mopeds that worked were going. The moped that broke down went on the pickup truck. But, that's the type of situation where you're forced, but ultimately turns out to be a beautiful thing, and connecting with people. On the business side, I think it is really important to, like you said, you need to prepare. You need to be there. You need to be open-minded. It always helps to understand the culture and read up on it. But one thing that I think is important is, no matter if it's business or personal, never really travel, from my point of view, with a checklist. Mm-hmm. Always be open to slow down, sit down, listen, and understand that you are up to something new. You need to get out of your comfort zone box, really do, because you will be in situations where, you don't understand. And there is a lot of willingness to share their success and their business experience with you if you are showing signs of being very open-minded to what they have to deliver to you.
Ooh, that's beautiful. I remember when Twitter was like early on, and you dove in early than most. A lot of people
Mhm.
just wait around, and then you put together a event around kids, and you invited Marcus Lemonis to be the guest speaker. Put
Mhm.
together this elaborate. I mean, it was wonderful. There's so many people there. Great speaker. I want you to just share with our viewers that kind of like, to my mind, you challenge yourself to
Mhm.
do different things. It's like, I don't know anything about Twitter, but I'm gonna jump in. I'm gonna figure it out. I don't know anything about bringing in a headline speaker, but I'm gonna figure it out. And if I
Mhm.
don't ask and then put some feet to the ground, it never happens. So share that what was you thinking about when you were putting that together for kids?
Well, actually, I have to give 100% credit to our daughter, Kaylin.
Okay.
I remember we were sitting in my office and I was entering business cards, and Kaylin and I always enjoyed watching Marcus Lemonis's TV show, The Prophet.
Yes.
And Kaylin always wanted to know how business was when I was traveling overseas, and what she was very interested. So at one point in time, she said, Daddy, everybody is talking about business for adults, but there's nothing about business for kids.
Mm.
And so how do kids do business? Because, you watch the Shark Tank and all these type of things. And there are, every now and then, there are some really, really entrepreneurial kids. And she asked
Mhm.
me, why is there nothing out there for kids? And that's how it started. So we started Kids Business Expo in Cobb County. And she said to me, wouldn't it be cool if Marcus Lemonis would be at the Kids Business Expo?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I don't know if he is going to do that. If he ever listens to this, thank you, Marcus, for all of what you did for us on that day. It really was meaningful. So I just reached out. I just literally, we were sitting there. Kaylin said, why don't you send him a Twitter message? And I did. And
Uh-huh.
I just literally said, it would be so interesting to have you with all these entrepreneurs in Metro Atlanta to come together. And here's Kids Business Expo. I don't know if you ever will read this post, but here it is. And believe it or not, that was on a Sunday, and Monday morning, 9 o'clock Central Standard Time, his office called me.
Wow.
And I said, well, he saw this and he is really interested. Tell us more about it. And I started communicating. And I will never forget that day that he showed up at the Cop Galleria. He came in. He didn't focus on me. He focused on our daughter. And
Yes.
we walked in and he spent time with her. He spent time with the kids. He went in there. He was so engaged with the kids. He went to the expo, as you know. We had an expo. He walked around. He actually looked at the products. He gave that one-on-one encouragement to kids, saying, give me a 30-second pitch, because
Yeah.
that's his big story. Give me a
Yeah.
30-second pitch. And he was absolutely fantastic. And it was so meaningful to all these young entrepreneurs in the event that, someone really listened to them. I remember he looked at the products. He was like talking to them about how did you develop that and so forth. So I think it's important to really focus on how can you share your expertise.
Mm-hmm.
How can you take the information that you have generated over your career and pass it on? And there are so many people out there that are really interested in learning from you. It's just you need to open up and share that information with them, and be interested in what people have to say. It might not be the very best idea to have a business, but you have to encourage people to take that step. And I believe that this is one of the very important parts of the business culture in America, is that we called it always in Germany, from the dishwasher to the millionaire. And it probably sounds Hollywoodish, but who cares? It's what a lot of people are looking at, and
Mhm.
I think that we can make that happen and continue to encourage our local businesses as well as other businesses to really, you know, step to the next point and write a review on Google Maps. When
Mhm.
you go to a restaurant or business, share
Mhm.
that information because people want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
And I think that's important that we do that.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think it is? We're in a kind of a very rapid changing world. AI is
Mhm.
flipping the world upside down, and our youth don't necessarily have the perspective that we have.
Mhm.
What would you do, and how would you consult if you were talking to a 20-year-old Dirk
Mhm.
about how rapidly things are going to change? What advice would you give to that 20-year-old Dirk?
I think AI is something that we need to learn about because it's there. It's not going to go away. We need to understand it. We need to, use advantage and take advantage of AI with us. And I think there is an important message from my point of view is
Mhm.
there is AI assisting and there's AI. And AI assisting is when you look at it, it can help you to streamline your day, to make your research model much easier, much quicker, much faster. But ultimately, I always tell people I see AI as I'm the chef, I'm going into the kitchen, I'm in
Mhm.
charge of putting that food on your table. But
Mhm.
AI is helping me to evaluate if I should put more salt or more pepper into the dish so it's edible when it goes out on the table in front of the guest. And that's where I think when I say AI assisting, I think that's where we can take advantage of AI and make sure that the information that we put in is meaningful because ultimately when we write as authors, we are looking up things. Is this restaurant still in place in London or has it changed? Is this
Mhm.
that restaurant that I visited 5 years ago in Florence, Italy, still in business? Because I really enjoyed going there to eat there. So that's where I think the information comes handy that we find now through AI and other tools. I think that, as you well know, I said it at the beginning, I am German. So, for me, English is a language that I communicate in every day, that I write in, that I, use.
Mhm.
But ultimately, it's not my first language. And so it helps me to better my writing. It helps me to better understand, to find some words that I'm looking for, but not necessarily find immediately or know. So AI can only be as good as what we make it. And the information that is filtered in from the outside to your world of AI, I think you need to be careful, but don't be afraid. Don't be too nervous because it's really there to help you. That's my opinion.
Do you think that as we're entering into this new era and they're talking about how much entrepreneurship is rising? We used
Mhm.
to work for somebody for all these years and we do what we're told to do, and we're kind of almost almost conditioned or trained to work for somebody. But when you become an entrepreneur, you have to really zero in on your value. You have to do things because if you're not, if nobody values you, they're not going to pay you. So there's
Yep.
no automatic paycheck. What do you think when it comes to the mindset shift? Did you have to kind of put yourself in a different mindset doing all the creating that you have done to create that value? Speak to our audience about what it takes to really think like an entrepreneur and act like an entrepreneur, because it's completely different than working for somebody.
It definitely is. And you need to understand that right now you might work, let's say, from 9 to 5. That goes away as soon as you put the name on the company or on your product or whatever. You will become basically a 24/7 workhorse, if you want to call it that, for yourself. I think that it's important that people who start today look at the true value of what they're bringing to the table, because they put their heart, sweat, and tears into it. And I have done that. I had my own business for 8 years. And there were at the very beginning those moments when I had to make a decision, do I spend the money here or do I buy another box of copy paper? And these are the things that a lot of people sometimes overlook in the enthusiasm that they have.
Mm-hmm.
All I can say is network, go out there, talk to people, pick up the phone, make phone calls. Don't be shy, because other people who are successful today didn't wake up one morning and were successful. They went through the exact same pain points as you are. They went through the exact same challenges as everybody else. They are just at the point where it's easier for them to overcome the pain that they have.
Mm-hmm.
Don't rush it. Really sit down and think about, do research. Is your product really out there? Is it not? Is that product somewhere overseas? How can you secure your rights on that idea that you're developing? Make sure that you're not spending time on administrative things.
Mm-hmm.
Your job as an entrepreneur down the road, within the first year, is probably tough to say, I have the money to hire an assistant or someone, but there are, services that can do that for you at a relatively reasonable fee.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure that you are not using your creative and powerful time for something that other people can do for you, and ask for help. Please ask for help, because you will be so much more successful if you do not do it on your own. And, I started writing the book. We have talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
I purposely left my wife and my daughter out of reading the book. I brought my book to other people to read the book. You know that from an author perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to give it to your loved ones, because often enough, people will not tell you what they really think. And it's the same thing with a product. If you have a sauce or a food item that you are trying to develop, they will always tell you it tastes really good and it's beautiful and it's well balanced and it's this and that. But is it really? Give it to people that you have never met. Go to their neighbor and tell them, what, I have this chicken nugget here that I want to dip in a sauce, and let's go and tell me what you think. Be honest.
Yeah, that's so good. We were talking about Rotary before, and we mentioned a few things during the podcast. I had a gentleman that I met through a friend. He came from Barcelona, didn't know how to speak one word of English. So he came over here with a golf scholarship, and he was telling me, that he's learning the new language. And all of a sudden, when I invited him to Rotary, I saw a different person. I saw a funny, comical, sarcastic, just a different side. And I remember afterward, I said, where did that humor come from? Because I never saw it. We did podcasts, and this is what he said. He said, I learned to think in English with humor. And he said that by learning that, when he thinks in with a kind of a humoristic, whatever thinking. So did you ever find, when you started learning a second language, how did you think? Did you think in German? Did you think in your new language? What was that like to all of a sudden start processing thoughts in a different language?
So I get this question quite often, because I think it's an interesting point of conversation. And what a lot of people overlook or are not aware of is really the process that someone who speaks a foreign language has to go to.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, my first language is German. I still think about German. My wife always says, when Dirk is really tired, he will speak German and think German, which is true.
Yeah.
It is very true.
Yeah.
So as we speak, I am listening to your comments
Yes.
in English. I translate them often still into German and then immediately retranslate them into English. So there's that extra in between step. So we're at step number 3. Now I have to present the fact to you. We're number 4. Then I'm sitting here and immediately listen to your feedback, which comes back in, and we're starting all the way again with the 5th step, getting it into my ear and then reprocessing. So the multilingual people often have to really process a couple of steps in between. That makes it sometimes a little bit more challenging to immediately respond because it's a communication. So when I travel overseas, I have to admit that often I am hiring a local interpreter, and for the sole reason of being able to hear what I want to hear, not what some people want to translate, so I hear from them.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing goes with languages overall. It is a challenge for people from at a specific age group when they get a little older. I remember my mother and my dad came over, and my dad spoke good English, but my mother didn't because she had a different linguistic background.
Mm-hmm.
So the important part is to show patience when you're talking to someone with a different language, because a lot of people are shy. They don't want to make mistakes. They don't want to embarrass themselves. They want to make sure that they're taken, as a full member of the conversation. And it's very important that you respect that as an individual.
Yeah, I noticed because I have podcasts all over the world, and
Mm-hmm.
I had Jessica from Bogota, and it was
Mm-hmm.
her first podcast in English. And then I had, when I think back of all the different ones that I know that English is a second language,
Mm-hmm.
there's something very common amongst it. You can see the processing. Like I can even see you, like I can see that when I do English, I had a gentleman right before Jessica. I barely got one question in. It was
Mm-hmm.
like rapid fire. And I called my friend who recommended him. I said, holy mackerel, I've just had a fire hose where I never asked one question. He just he went full up. But the ones that are bilingual, they're
Mm-hmm.
very precise in their answers, very thoughtful in their answers, and they don't just blab out like some of my English only guests on there. So it makes sense now you talk about the processing of steps and stages that we go through when we are bilingual. I don't
Right.
know because I barely get English.
Well, and there's one other little bitty tiny token here on the side
Yeah.
is also, when you speak with people from Europe, for example,
Yeah.
often they speak 3 or 4 or 5 languages.
Yes.
And so, if you have someone who speaks French, Italian, and Spanish, and English, and German, some of those words are so close that they're sometimes saying something and oh, well, that was really Italian and not Spanish, but that's okay, or French.
Yes.
And one thing that's going back to Rotary, I think
Mhm.
that's one of these huge advantages. If you have over 200,000 clubs around the world, and you have 1.4 million people who all are for the same mission,
Mhm.
helping and changing the world. When you go to these international conferences where you have 100+ countries present who all represent their culture, and you are in this melting pot of languages and food, and they all bring something from their country, you feel immediately included into this you can say whatever you want to say because everybody else thinks the same way. And when people go to Rotary meetings here in the United States, like to our clubs, your club or my club,
Mm-hmm.
your club is an older club. Ours is only about 4 years old. We started in 2022, and we're in North Georgia mountains, so we don't get the internationality that an Alpharetta club or an Atlanta downtown club will have.
Mm-hmm.
But what brings all of us together, no matter what language you speak, is really that mission of Rotary and making a difference. And when you look at how we connect with a club in India to start building bathrooms in schools,
Mm-hmm.
or helping an eye project in Haiti, or doing things like that, but all of us have the same mission. Ultimately, when you go to these missions hands-on and want to help build those schools,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter that you do not speak the local language. There's someone there who can help you.
Yes.
And if not, I've been in many places around the world where nobody spoke English. Believe me, it was,
Mm-hmm.
you look around and hope for some help will show up, and somebody knows somebody who will bring somebody who can speak at least enough English to make you comfortable and give you directions to the next place where you want to go to as a solo traveler or something like that.
Yeah, there's been at least half a dozen or more guests that I've had on that I didn't know were Rotarians, but like just something came up, and then all of a sudden, oh yeah, I've been in Rotary for 8 years, and
Yes.
I had Mark Zimmerman.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so Mark moved up into the mountains. I think he's in like Blue Ridge or.
No, he's living right here in Bicono, and he's a member. He's actually the program chair this year.
Is he? Okay,
He
I was
is.
wondering if he was like sister
Oh
Rotary
no, he's.
clubs
I,
up
I
there.
pulled him in. I pulled him in as soon as he became like aware of it. I said, "Oh, Mark, by the way, I think you really are a perfect Rotarian to come." So
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, and he was telling me like when Rotary came to Atlanta a few
Mm-hmm.
years back, he wanted to
1906.
kind of get to know what Rotary was all about. So he
Mm-hmm.
went to, I think, Japan,
Mm-hmm.
it was somewhere in Asia, to the convention to get a feel of what a convention was like of that magnitude. And then, of course, he came back to Atlanta, or was working at the Congress Center and was doing everything with that international event. Yeah, that was a person I had no idea. We were just
Mm-hmm.
talking, and all of a sudden we
Yeah, we
realized
have.
we were
I,
Rotarians.
for many years, I worked for German trade show organizations, and
Mm-hmm.
it was always interesting that we had an international Rotary luncheon.
Mm-hmm.
And we would set up a table, and Rotarians could come in and sign up and go in and have lunch with us. And the fact that you sit at a long community table, as we would call them today, with
Mm-hmm.
15 people from 13 countries who all have the same interest and who share the same philosophy and vision, that's one of the things that I think the business world is really strong about. I think that's one of the foundations of business around the world, is really connecting with each other and make sure that we all are successful in what we do. But often we cannot do it alone, And if you're sitting at the table with 13 people from all around the world, everybody will be able to help you with something
Mm-hmm.
and open doors. And I've been in Dubai, I've been in Germany, Italy, all over the world to Rotary meetings and makeups. And what is always there, no matter what, is food. And that back to what you said, food brings us together.
Yes.
I think curiosity is the reason for us to travel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily just to check off another destination on your list. It is really to experience that destination.
Yes.
And I think if you go back to what the book is about, Travel That Makes Sense, is about the people, the food, the culture that comes along with it, and then the stories that you take back home and share when you get to it. So, as I said, every traveler makes mistakes, but we need to be open-minded to say, somebody out there is going to help me and get through this.
Mm. Was limited on traveling over the last couple of years, so I would go to the gym and just right down the street to a French cafe, and it was just awesome food. But then when I rented a cyber truck from a friend of mine at church, and I saw and then went out with my granddaughters and took it for the whole day, I was going like, oh my gosh, this is freedom, because I could push a button and it drives. Now I'm going to all these things. I went down to Peachtree with self-driving, and it's given me freedom. But I wanted to ask you about Rotary Leadership Internet, RLI. Back when I was in the Marietta Rotary, it wasn't around, but I think it's the finest leadership development of anybody could get at any age, because it's so powerful in what they teach you, the people you meet. And that's when Audley said about food, have good food. And they had shrimp and they had chicken. They had the best food. I mean, the shrimp was so big, and this was a lunch. And so they obviously have taken a chapter out of your book to say, we got to have good food, develop those relationships, and really keep learning, keep growing, keep developing ourselves.
I think what is important to RLI is that they teach the entire spectrum of membership of all ages. You have someone who just steps into the business world. I remember when I first came here, when I moved here permanently with Kathy, who is from Tennessee, and my father-in-law, one of the first things he said was, you need to become a Rotarian.
Oh,
and he was right. He was right, and you learn. I was a young one. I never really had any idea about Rotary, because it's so different around the world. The business practices and membership practices around the world are completely different in Rotary. Ultimately, we all have the same goal in mind, but there are different responsibilities and requirements. So RLI is really teaching the young and the old, and you have some members who are in their 70s, and you have some who are in the mid-20s, and teaching you about the way to make a difference. How can you probably set some money aside for Polio Plus, so that we can eradicate Polio Plus, which is mostly eradicated. I think there's 2 countries left that have it actually, which is Afghanistan and Pakistan. And there's an opportunity to actually get on a plane and fly to India and do a live polio vaccination by putting this little drop on the mouth of this little bitty child, put a little bitty black color on the pinky finger so that they know that they have been vaccinated, and you are hands-on. And you learn that at these leadership institutes, because it tells you not only what you can do personally, but it also tells you how your money as a club is developing. You as a club set aside $1,000 as a number. Your district will match. Then Rotary International will match. And all of a sudden, out of 1,000, it's 4,000. And you get to that point where your dollar really carries on. And I remember I was very impressed knowing that way over 90% of your financial commitment will reach that project that you commit to support. And this is a reason why we have, Rotary around the world to make these differences. RLI is the way to learn.
Yeah, really. It was like I went to our conference up at Lake Lanier, and the speaker was from Pakistan who had polio. And I, be honest with you, it just was a word. I didn't know anybody with it. I didn't kind of understand it, but he literally crawled or scooted into the room on his hands and knees and went to the stage. And it was like, it took, 5, 6, 7 minutes, but it brought polio to life. And then he went and talked about it and all the things it just, I never understood it until that moment of
Yeah.
really emotionally connecting with life as a polio survivor or having polio and what your life is like when you are inflicted with polio.
Yes, and it's so right because these are things that you also learn when you travel. Going back to the beginning of our conversation, travel allows you to experience that. When you travel, you see things that you would usually not necessarily be exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
And, I remember I was in Korea. It's part of the book. It's one of the chapters about South Korea. I was at a fruit market and I bought a couple of fruit and I paid the lady, the owner of that fruit stand, and walked away. And that's one thing I always tell people, make sure that you learn your bills on the currency because you can pull something out and you don't know that it's not enough or it's way too much.
Mm-hmm.
On my story, it was way too much. And she turned around, and all of a sudden, I heard some voices behind me. And I turned around and I saw this lady coming to me, handing me some change back.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said, no, it's okay, she didn't accept it. And these type of stories are stories that you learn at Rotary international conferences or the Alliance or other organizations just like Rotary.
Mm-hmm.
Is you understand through travel what you can do in order to make a difference. And I think that's very important. And Rotary and other organizations like Lions and Toastmaster, etc., they all have a very important role in our society.
Yes. What is Dirk most excited about this year and beyond?
Okay, Dirk is very excited, and I'm putting the pitch here. Is excited about the book coming out at the end of
Mm-hmm.
October. It is a journey that I have experienced. Each of these chapters is my story, is my experience traveling. Unfortunately, there is a limitation of pages and what you can write. And so it's 15 countries, starting in Asia,
Mm-hmm.
traveling to Europe, over to South America, then to North America, and then through Canada, ending back up in Asia and Japan. And each of those stories is a story that connects to a person. It's a book that is not the typical travel checklist book, which
Mm-hmm.
has a huge part in travel, is important. But this book is really to tell people slow down, understand the culture, the people, the food, and understand how you can express what this book is really sending out, the message. So
Mm.
that is what I'm excited about. The future, when you go about that, is um, you know sharing the message, going to podcasts, having the opportunity to share my personal experience and story. Um, People like to understand from personal experience what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the travel today, there are so many solo travelers out there, women and men of all ages who travel with their family, who take their kids on the first trip to Europe or to Italy or wherever they go. Travel is the way to really do that. But for me personally, I look forward to a couple of more years in the business world and do what I do and love to do is organizing trade shows and conferences, and
Mm-hmm.
then find a direction to settle down and follow my passion of writing about travel and food.
Ooh, I love that. Yeah, I have one of my courses is journaling for freedom. And it because
Mhm.
it freed me from
Yeah,
something I never knew because I was always reluctant. But it's just once you get moving and you start expressing yourself, it's
yeah,
just amazing how I won't say addictive, but how it just is something that you enjoy putting
yeah,
those thoughts together.
yeah.
So how can people get more of Dirk?
Well, people can get more of Dirk by starting with my website, which is foodbloggerjourney.com.
Hmm.
And that has about 180 articles now and blog posts there about travel, equipment, safety, food in various places around the world. And all of these stories that you will read are the ones that Dirk has really been through. And then, of course, the book is coming out at the end of October. I hope to have it in hand by the end of October, and then on markets and conversations and so forth, presentations starting the middle of November. They can reach out to me at dirkebener@gmail.com. They can call. You can, if you want to, post the number there or connect me
Yeah,
otherwise.
we put it in the show notes.
Perfect. And, I really believe that there is a message that we all have that we need to share.
Mm-hmm.
And your message, sharing with podcasts, mine with a website, and then also Rotary, I think, is a powerhouse that is out there. And I believe that we can do a lot of good by just stepping out of a comfort zone and make a difference.
Ooh, that's beautiful. At my last live event, we had 3 Rotarians that spoke. And
That's
I have
awesome.
one coming up the end of July and then end of September. So maybe one of those events, I'd love for you to speak at those events, because I think, I always tell people, write a book, get it down, because you can't, once you're gone, it's gone. It's, but when you have a book, you have something to pass on, something that people can read and get to know and be able to go on that journey with you.
I think a book focus needs to be on your story. There are so many tools now out there, that you can use to help you to do this. And so many books out there are today written about just sharing that and passing it on to family members. It's not we all love success, but that's not the focus of so many books out there.
Yes.
Your message is absolutely correct. Do not stop. If you have a story to tell, as small or as huge it is, really take that opportunity and write it down. Start journaling tomorrow when you're traveling, because that's something that you and I both have experienced and has helped us to get to the point of where we have a message to share. So that's what I would really, share at the very end of this is, don't stop, journal, write down things, be open-minded about other cultures, be open-minded about, the food that you eat when you travel. Yes, you will make a decision and order the wrong food, but you know what? At the end of the day, it's a learning curve and it's an experience, and it's a wonderful thing that we all can share down the road with our children and grandchildren.
It's absolutely so cool sharing that. Tell our viewers, what's the one thing you would want our viewers to take home from our time on this podcast?
Really be open-minded and share, and do not be afraid to ask for help and offer help. Helping and offering help and receiving help is what will make you stronger in your next part of whatever your journey is. Because without being out there for each other, we will not get anywhere.
That is so good. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have a fellow Rotarian on the podcast. And I'm so excited about your book coming out in October. I'll be the first to order it once it's live and ready to go, because I'll be looking forward to really getting. I've always been interested in cultures, different cultures. And I know our conversations in the past have been on that. And it'll be good to be able to read, because I'm now an avid reader, which I never was.
Well, it's going to be, Travel Makes Sense is the title of the book. It's going to be available in paperback as well as an ebook, and it's going to be on the typical platforms out there. So Travel Makes Sense hopefully will offer exactly that journey that you are talking about, and telling people that it's okay to do that yourself, because you will meet an amazing group of people outside when you travel, but travel that makes sense to you. Do not let other people really make that decision for you. Make it yourself. So Travel Makes Sense is the book.
Awesome. Dirk, thank you so much for taking the
Thanks, Pete.
time to be a guest on the podcast. We
I
appreciate it.
appreciate you a lot. Thank you so much.